have the pleasure to meet with Dr. David Cohen, who is a trialist and a clinical investigator in the interventional structural arena, and we're welcoming him to talk about certain aspects of his career.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. I was a fellow once myself, like many of you. So what would you like me to talk about?
We are interested in how you transitioned from being a clinician in interventional cardiology into a clinician investigator and a trialist, running like major trials like the preview one.
Sure.
And we want to know how the skill sets that you accumulated in training transitioned into the early career phase.
So this is something I've thought a fair amount about over my career, which is quite long at this point. And I think there are a couple of keys to really being able to succeed in clinical investigation, as well as being a proceduralist, which is not so easy because procedures take time, they take commitment. You have to have a certain amount of procedures because you get better. And so you can't sacrifice that. Your patients still come first. So I would say the most important thing for me is to get methodologic training. So when I was a fellow, when I was between my second and third year, I did a program at the Harvard School of Public Health, which was very new then. It's still going on today, much more established, but was called the Program in Clinical Investigation. And it was, a lot of places have this. I don't know if Mayo Clinic has this, but a lot of medical schools these days, it provides you with basic training in biostatistics, in epidemiology, in clinical trial design, health services research, all of these topics. And that actually, I had not learned any of that in medical school. I think it's more commonly taught in medical school these days. But that was really eye-opening for me about understanding these methods, and being able to understand research methods made me a much more engaged clinician. So when you know the methods, when you know the techniques, you don't necessarily have to be able to do them yourself. I think it's a good idea to do them yourself when you're just starting out. But what that does do is you are a much more, your eyes are more open. When you're looking at your procedures or your patients, questions will occur to you, and you will much more quickly understand, how is this something that we might be able to study in a rigorous way? What would be the techniques that I would be required to do this? Is it statistical? Is it data collection? All of those different things. And so having that grounding was really probably the most important thing for me. That was number one. Number two is to have an open mind, because I guarantee you that whatever you think you're going to be doing in 5 years, you won't be. In some way, there will be something that came up along the way. If you're open-minded, if you're willing to experiment a little bit, that will be, again, career-changing in some way for you. So, for example, for me, as part of this clinical investigator program, I met a professor at the Harvard School of Public Health named Milton Weinstein. And he was really the inventor of the entire field of medical cost-effectiveness analysis. And the things he was doing and the things he taught us really resonated with me. I thought this is a very interesting way to organize your thoughts around what procedures, what is the value of procedures, how do we evaluate all these things. And so when I finished that course, I came back to my program. I was just starting my interventional year at that time. And this was in the early 1990s. So stents were brand new. We had things like directional atherectomy. There were no drug-eluting stents. We had stents, we had directional atherectomy, we had rotablator in its early stages. And I asked my cath lab director, a guy named Don Boehm at the time, do you think anybody would be interested if I tried to figure out if these things were cost-effective or not? And he said, yeah, sure, why don't you try? And just that little thing was like, oh, okay. So somebody thinks it might be a good idea, and I have these methods. And so now I can try to apply them, take something from over here and apply that to the disease I'm interested in studying. And suddenly my whole career changed, because that's really how my entry into doing clinical trials, into doing, late breakers at meetings, all of those things was through this connection that I never planned at all. And so I really do think, and just in my career, the devices that we use today in interventional cardiology, the only balloons and rotablator are the only things that were around when I trained. everything else, stents were investigational. Drug-eluting stents didn't exist. TAVR didn't exist. MitraClip didn't exist. None of those things exist. Nobody could even imagine them. And so I guarantee that there are things you can't imagine today that you will be, in 20 years, you'll be doing. And so we have to be flexible. And so I think those, to me, are two very good things. And then the third one is, like, when you find a good mentor, stick with them, because they're not always so easy to find. But even after you finish fellowship, early in your career especially, having mentorship, senior mentorship, is valuable, because they can, again, help you evaluate projects before you start them. They can connect you to different people, all those sorts of things. So I think those are three ideas.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for those insights. And when you started as an early career interventional cardiologist, in the era where, like, things were starting, like, to be investigated and taking off, how did you balance your research interests and your clinical investigation with the clinical time? How was the split?
So I've almost always in my career had about a 50-50 split between research and clinical. And I was lucky, because at that time it was easier to do that. I think there were two reasons why it was easier. Number one, just the money was different. But number two, there weren't so many things to know. There was no structural heart disease. I mean, the only the procedures that we did in 1991, 92, 93, when I was in my fellowship, were balloon aortic valvuloplasty and mitral valvuloplasty. Those were the only structural. There was no, no valve treatments other than those. There was no treatment for PFOs. There was no left atrial appendage occlusion. None of that existed. So there were just less things to know, and nobody was doing complex CTOs or any of those sort of things. So I think that helped. But I think the message there is focus. That you're going to come out of your fellowship and you're going to say, I want to do everything, and you can't. And also be an investigator. I mean, there's too many jobs. And so you should try to, you really have to limit yourself in some way. Now, it may be at different phases of your life, you do different things. But to limit, if you want to have a very serious investigative career, you're going to have to limit the clinical stuff you take on. So for me, when structural really started taking off in the mid 2000s and, up through 2015 with the introduction of TAVR, I only did TAVR as my structural procedure. I was not trying to do MitraClip back then and tricuspid interventions or, some of the other, or LAA. I mean, I was happy with TAVR and coronaries. And then after I got good at TAVR, then I could say, okay, now I'll learn mitral. And now I'm learning tricuspid, because I'm not going to be the guy who's going to do these things first.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I am going to be the guy who tries to figure out if they work.
Okay. Interesting. So you try to balance the open-mindedness with the focus by focusing in each stage.
Yeah, I think. You can. You have to. Yeah. I think be detail-oriented, be focused in your research. Ideally, have either a disease or a procedure or a method that you're, expert in. For me, in the early stages, it was cost effectiveness. And so I applied that wherever I could find something to hit with that hammer. But now I'm a little more focused and I've broadened out. But again, early focus is good, because then people will recognize you as an expert in whatever that is, that's something that interests you. And things will hopefully come to you, that your mentors will help you get connected. And people will see you presenting on these things at meetings and say, oh, we need him. He's the guy who really knows everything about, the evoke valve. And, we need him to help us with the next big trials or things like that.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much. It was a very informative interview, and thank you all for watching. And for more videos, please watch our channel at YouTube and on X, Fits on the Go. Thank you.